Welcome to Chasing the Beats, a show dedicated to weeklybeats.com artists, their songs, and stories from the 2024 season. I'm your host, SQF, and our guest today is Judgement Act. All right, welcome, Judgement Act.
Hello, welcome. Thank you for having me, even.
Yeah, it's great to have you on, and have thanked you in previous episodes for helping set up the Discord group and helping post things when I forget to or I'm unavailable. So thanks in person for helping out with all that.
No, you're more than welcome. It's one of those things that takes like so little effort from my end to set that stuff up, but I think it has a big impact on the community, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's just been able to find the episodes and discuss them in a way more organized way. So yeah, appreciate it.
I think it's nice to have it like, I don't know, like obviously most of the people listening to the podcast, well, I assume are Weekly Beats members. So having it all in one spot rather than like on YouTube and all that sort of stuff, the comments that is, I think is really cool.
Yeah.
And the conversations that always come up after it are awesome as well.
Yeah, I know. I like, because I didn't realize before you made the Discord area how little or how dispersed the conversation was, and now there's some really good conversation going on. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, cool. I know that this is not your first Weekly Beats.
No.
You've been around for a bit.
Yeah. So I first started the second week of 2012, so the first year of Weekly Beats. But the other, I guess the sort of, I guess the tempering sort of on that is that I have never done 52 weeks of Weekly Beats throughout this entire time. So
that's okay.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I every year it's like, yep, this is the year. This is the year I'm going to do it, and it never is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've been around. The only year I missed was 2014, and so since then it's been at least I think 8 tracks was my least amount of tracks for a year. So
yeah, what has gotten in the way for you?
I think, and it's like that. I think listening to this podcast in particular, I get a lot of, I wouldn't call it imposter syndrome, but I'm like, oh wow, like a lot of people who participate in Weekly Beats are like real music artists, right? Whereas for me, it's very much been like a hobby and one of many hobbies. So
yeah,
it's something that as soon as it gets too hard for me, I just don't do it. I don't, I'm not gonna kill myself to get it done.
Right.
But I think definitely in recent years, I've put more emphasis on music and finding a lot more joy in it. So I think my participation's gone up. Sort of, it's an upwards trend over the years.
Yeah,
but it's just one of those things that it's just hard. I mean,
yeah, it is, and
yeah,
I feel like there's a lot of people that will kind of move everything else in their life to make Weekly Beats happen.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're one of those that's like, I've got some work-life balance or just like life balance in general.
Yeah.
I've got other hobbies, other interests. So Weekly Beats is not always my like number one thing.
For sure. And I feel like oftentimes, so for a bit of context, I'm a game developer, or right now, not, but my identify as a game developer, I guess, is probably the best way to put it, right? Like that's my core sort of passion. But I didn't really I found game development as a passion after I found music as a passion. So it's sort of, I feel like music sort of took the back seat from like a creative output. standpoint.
Mhm.
Like when I'm making games, I have absolutely no desire to make the music for those games, which is people always question that, but it's
Well, it's like 2 different creative pathways, you
yeah,
know?
totally. And a lot of game development is just it's problem solving, whereas music is obviously there's problem solving in music as well, but it's a very different kind of
Yeah, it's completely different.
yeah. So it's something that like I think I've also got the sort of the classic problem of like if I break my streak, I find it really hard to come back
Yeah.
to weekly
Yeah.
beats, which is like I know objectively is stupid, and no one cares, and I shouldn't care, but it is something that it's almost like, well, I haven't done 52, so what's the point? But trying to shift that mindset to
Right.
being a little bit more like, no, the point is I'm making music because
Yeah, like several other guests have said, like, it's more to them about knowing that they created something
yeah,
at the end of the week rather than, like, a streak or, just knowing that putting the work in, you have something at the
yeah,
end.
and I think it's also like I feel like if I had already done 52 weeks, I'd care less about it. But I think part of that is like I want that 52-week year, and so when I break the streak, it's like, oh well, that's not going to happen this year.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, I see, yeah.
it's very like it's like a I've got this whole thing about like I hate New Year's resolutions, right? Like I'm all about the setting like a theme for the year.
Yeah.
There's a like the Cortex podcast with CGP Grey and the other guy, I can't remember his name, and they talk about yearly themes where you don't have a set goal that you can fail. It's just like these are the things I'm working on this year.
Yeah.
And I'm really, really believe in that. But then when it comes to weekly beats, I'm like, no, I either win or I lose.
Yeah.
It's unhelpful entirely. So, uh,
Yeah, I get that. What was your music making before 2012?
um, so I started making music uh, 2009 ish. I think that's when I first started using FL Studio, which is what I still use today. Before that, I was like making doing some compiling loops together in like Audacity, which was a nightmare. Don't recommend that. Um, and that was like high school for me. So that was I think I was like 15 in 2009. So I was playing bass in music at high school, and they're just making like dumb tracks to play in class and that thing. So no formal education in that I learned to play bass at a high school level, but
Yeah,
I couldn't tell you what the notes on a bass staff are these days. So
you're a tabs guy.
uh,
Ish.
I can read music. It's just maybe not the bass clef anymore. I think it's just. I mean, yeah. Obviously, I use tabs a ton because I was 15 and it was easier. But but I haven't had a bass for years. Like I definitely kind of dropped that. Got into electronic music, and yeah, a long time. I've not had any hardware at all. It's been purely in the box, in FL Studio in particular. So yeah, I think it's one of those things that it came up on the podcast a bunch of times of that idea of like knowing music theory and how that
Yeah,
can kind of impact your ability to make music. And for me, it's like I've always like it feels like it would impact your ability to reliably make cool sounding music, if that makes sense. Like the
like
structure.
box you in too much?
Yeah, but also I feel like if I'm just plopping chords down into the piano roll with my mouse, I'm also just doing the same thing over and over again as well. So it's like if I can,
Yeah.
yeah, know the rules so you can break them type thing, right?
Yeah, like, I know where you're coming from because it's like, you want to do something to kinda shake up the norm or get out of your, like, go-to habits,
Yeah,
and music theory is one of those things that, like, I've dug pretty deep into it and learned a lot about it, especially like relative to the piano, which I do not
Mm.
play. But I just think the piano layout is like makes way more sense than a guitar, like just
Yeah,
learning music theory.
for sure.
But
I
I've
think,
never gotten to a point where I'm like, uh, I use this music theory knowledge to like spice up what I'm doing or break
Mhm.
out of that box, like I just haven't connected them to like any sort of useful workflow.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of it is. I think a lot of the utility for me that I identify as like a gap in my knowledge is things like being able to hear pitch, right? Like being able to identify what we're hearing right now,
Yeah.
and be able to replicate that. Particularly as like doing remixes and stuff like that, collaborations with people. That's obviously super handy.
Mhm.
I'm always that guy when we're doing a collab that's like, oh, cool. Can you tell me what key this is in and what those chords are, and also send me the MIDI? But yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where like there's so many tools these days as well that you can kind of lean on to just create things that are musically nice to listen to. I guess from the
Mhm.
the Western mindset at least, and I definitely lean on a lot of things like that. There's an app called Scalar, or a VST that you can kind of build chord progressions and stuff in, which I find
Oh, okay.
quite useful. But that again, almost like music theory in general, it's sort of I also often find myself just going, oh, maybe I'll just pick one of the chord progressions that they have in here and just use that.
Yeah.
And it's like,
That
yeah,
sounds pretty good.
yeah. And for me,
Yeah.
it's like I don't know. I think because of that like hobbyist mindset and it not being my kind of core hobby, I guess, is that I'm less interested in the like bits and pieces and putting my own thought into that. The chords, the the exact patches that I'm using, whatever. I'm more interested in what comes out the other end, right? And
Yeah.
putting my stamp on the overall kind of sound that's
Yeah, it's the whole assembled song to you is more important than like stressing out over like
exactly, yeah.
the little tiny like which riser you used or
Mm.
yeah.
And for that, like you know, I think it was Ked Break or it might have been Level Capybara. I can't remember. Either way, both fantastic. They were talking about just using just presets for everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, that's pretty much me. I very rarely modify any patch, but I do think it's one of those things that again I identify as maybe a bit of a weakness, right? Like if I have an idea for a sound, it's like, how do I get this sound? Do I just scroll through this patch list until I find it,
Right.
or can I
Yeah.
actually create it? And so last year, late in the year, I started awful, terrible idea. I don't recommend it to anyone, but started building up a modular setup.
Oh
Um,
man.
which is already, I think I've already spent more on that than I've spent on any other music stuff in my entire, like, it's so easy to spend money on that stuff.
I know. I was talking with Napier about modular stuff,
Mhm.
and he recommended, I'll have to go back and listen to it again. He recommended a kind of like modular but in the computer solution
Yep.
where you
Yeah.
can kind of like try out modular without.
Yeah. So there's VCV Rack, I think, is the main
Yeah, I
one.
think that's what he was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really
Yeah.
cool. But for me, I was like, if I'm actually ever going to, because the reason I got it is like, I want to make stuff, I want to start with a, sine wave or whatever and actually build a sound up. And I
Yeah.
find it really hard to like care about that if it's on my computer screen.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
when I'm actually, turning a knob, it just feels so much better. Even though like it's so much harder to like get the sounds I want. Like I don't. One of the things I'm missing on my modular right now is like any like FX at all, because all
Yeah.
FX modules are like ridiculously expensive. So it's like at the moment I'm just pretty much putting out like pure sound and then having to change stuff in FL Studio or something like that.
But I
Well,
mean, I'm with you on the like you can do all of this stuff in the computer,
yeah.
but I'm on a computer most of the day.
Yes. Yes.
And there's something just tactile about like having this box that does these things, or like a modular rack
Yep.
that, like, another thing that I always think about is like software changes so often. Like
Hmm.
in 4 years, I'll still be able to use my box, but like
Yeah.
the software, like, oh, I gotta upgrade. Like it's
Hmm.
sort of never ending.
And it's interesting as well with FL Studio in particular, is because it's lifetime free upgrades, right? So there's never any reason to stick on a specific version of FL Studio because they're not charging you $200 or whatever to get the next
Right.
one. So you're always like, oh, what's you open it up, you get a little pop up. Oh, there's a new version. What's new in that? And then you spend the next 20 minutes updating FL Studio. And
Yeah.
but it's weird, right? Because I feel like the bar for what I consider to be good when I'm using simpler like hardware is lower, right? Like if I make a cool little sound on my modular, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. But if I'd made that in FL Studio, I'd be like, whatever, this is a boring sound. So I don't know what that is about, but I mean, I
Yeah,
guess
that's interesting.
it's probably just I've actually put work into it as opposed to just picking it out of a list. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
There's some experience
yeah,
in that sound that like clicking a preset doesn't give you.
for sure. And I think like part of the reason I never really cared to you know carefully craft my own patches and stuff is because at the end of the day, the listener doesn't know that, right?
Yeah, I mean, the listener is judging the entire whole piece, which is kind of the
Yeah,
part that you really care about anyway.
yeah. And I think there's like I feel like I've been very transactional in the way that I make music a lot of the time. Is like I make a thing, I put it out there, and then I don't think about it. Right? Like I'll go back and listen to it. I'm one of those people who gets high on their own supply, but it's like it's kind of like it's done now. I don't like I'm never chasing perfection on the mix or anything like that. It's just
Yeah.
it's a thing. It's out there. It probably doesn't sound that good, but there it is. I like it. That's the
Yeah,
important
yeah.
thing.
I'm definitely not one of those people that is like, I just gotta change the EQ on that
Hmm.
hi-hat, or like I'm like, that's done.
Yeah,
It lives as it is. Do I go back and listen to them occasionally? But I'm kind of like, I got to work on the next thing.
exactly. And I think sometimes you like listen to a track and you're like, oh man, I really wish I'd not done that specific sound or something like that. And it's like, if you really care, usually there's a way to go back and change that.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, it's not a big deal, but usually I don't care enough to actually open FL and find the project. And like,
My song regrets are more about arrangement. Like,
yep.
I really wish like this section is like too long, or
Yeah.
like I rarely am like, that sound just needs a little extra.
Yeah. So, sometimes I like put in like a really high pitched, like, I don't know, like a lead or something. And then it sounds fantastic in the moment. And then you come back and listen to it like a week later and you're like, what the hell was I thinking? Like, this is awful.
I love that. I'm fascinated by the music process
Hmm.
that I've talked about several times before, of just like you said, in the moment, like, man, this is a fucking hit.
Yeah.
And then the next day you're like, man, what was
Wow.
I thinking?
And I feel like, for me at least, it seems that the reverse happens more often than not, right? Like I put something out, the classic weekly beat speed trash, and then I'm like, oh, actually, no, it's pretty awesome, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, more of that imposter syndrome, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like it's like I don't. We talked about it. I can't remember if it was in the comments of one of the podcast threads or just on the Weekly Beats Discord in general, but we're talking about the kind of different experience you get, the experience of like making the music and listening to your own music versus the experience of releasing your music, like two totally different
Yeah.
mindsets, right? Like I don't really care if people listen to my music necessarily, but like I do obviously enjoy hearing people talk about my music. but I
Yeah.
separate that entirely. Like my worth in my music is not tied to that. It's like whether I think it sounds cool. Because
Yeah.
I'll release something on Spotify or YouTube or whatever. Not so much for other people to hear it necessarily. I mean, that's obviously part of it, but so I can very easily go back and listen to it on the bus myself.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm
Well, I
like,
mean, I think you have to do it for yourself,
yeah,
because if you are constantly making music with the expectation that someone's going to like it or someone's going to comment, uh
yeah,
that's a fast road to not making music.
yeah. But I think I don't know. It's things like there's always that latent pressure, right? It's like, oh, my track only has 200 views versus this other track that got 12,000 views. I'm constantly haunted.
Yeah.
The Mission Crossing is going to laugh when he listens to this because it's his like favorite track of mine. But I made this remix of the UNATCO theme from Deus Ex about 12, 13 years ago. And I hate it. And it's awful, but it's got the most views of any of my songs. And I regularly get comments on the YouTube video that are like, "Oh, this is awesome! This is amazing," and I'm just like,
And you're like, I hate it.
"Is it though?" I like it's not like totally awful, but it's like, yeah, it's that classic thing of, wow, I would do all of these things differently now. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
I do try and like not, I'm not trying to make a career out of it. So I have that. I'm in that privileged position, I guess, that I can just kind of make music for me and don't really care whether it's listenable or interesting to other people.
Yeah, I've kind of been thinking about this a lot lately, that I think there's a natural inclination for people to kind of like hold on to their musical creations because
Mm,
they could be worth money.
yeah.
But I was thinking recently, it's kind of freeing that like no one's gonna make any money off of this music, because there's just so
Yeah.
much music out there. Like, face it, none of us are gonna make money off of
Yeah.
music. So that made me kind of think about like, what if we shared more of our stuff
Hmm.
along the way, like almost like open source the music making progress and
Yeah.
shared, like, I came up with this cool beat, does anyone want to use this, or like, here's a song that's like midway in progress, like, who wants to like take a stab at like taking it to another direction.
Yeah. It's almost like, if Splice was not a for-profit company, right? Like
Right,
a
right.
database of just stuff to play with. And yeah, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like Weekly Beats is very much, so much of the music on Weekly Beats is like Creative Commons licensed, and
Yeah,
heaps of people do remixes and stuff like that. That I think it kind of fosters that community. There's people who go back
for
and
sure.
do like, like a rap over someone else's beat or something like that,
Yeah, yeah,
and that's really cool. But it is like, it is particularly nowadays when there's so much more music on Weekly Beats than there ever has been. It's so much harder to find all of that music. You just like,
yeah.
you open it up and you're like, okay, there's 300 tracks for me to listen to this week. Like, it's not going to happen. So
No. That's why we have a show to highlight,
that's
at
it.
least, 50 people.
Yeah, man, it's rough, and I feel so bad. It's like 4 weeks in, I get really slack with the commenting. It's just like,
It's hard. It's
yeah,
hard. Like, it's almost as hard as making the music.
hmm and it's
Uh,
such a like an active listening process as well. Like,
yeah, like, you can't background listen and comment.
yeah, yeah,
Like, it's just not gonna happen. So it
for
is
sure.
very, but to kinda back up a little bit, how did you find out about Weekly Beats in 2012 or 2011?
That is a good question. So it was definitely the start of 2012 because I missed that first week. I think
Because you don't have an M8, right?
I do not know, and the M8 also super didn't exist. So um, I think, and I could be wrong, but I believe Mini Machine, who's one of the site mods, I had him on Facebook for some reason. I don't recall why. Possibly because I was doing a bit of DJing and stuff back then, so we may have connected through that. And I'm pretty sure he probably clued me on it. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. And then because back then there was no, it was just the forums. There was no, I don't think the IRC had been created yet in 2020. Oh no, sorry.
IRC.
I just looked at the forums, and on January 15th, Laserbeat created the IRC channel on Espinet. So it was there. But then it like died almost like, I think between 2012 and 2016 or something. And 2016 was about when Discord came out, I think. And so, that the Discord, I think,
Took over.
yeah. And I think like it's just so much easier to chat to people. I feel like it's a better environment for this sort of community than a forum is. Not that I think the forum is really important, but just that actual conversation, I think, is really cool.
Yeah. I mean, forums are great, but they definitely feel very old.
Yeah. It sucks because I grew up on forums.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think if you've been on the internet as long as we have,
for sure,
you've been on forums.
and it's one of the classic thing of like, man, I want to find some information about this thing, and it's like, well, there's no forums about that thing anymore because it's 2025 and no one has forums. Yeah. So you go and join their Discord, and then you search their Discord, and you've got to wade through all the garbage, and it's a good time. But I like the combination of a Discord and a forum. So you can have those longer form discussions on the forum if you want. But I'm not really sure that happens anymore. But
I mean,
it's there.
I guess the where you post the music and comments is technically a forum.
True. That's very true. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the comments are a lot more active than the forum. For sure. Yeah.
And so since 2012, even though you haven't done, full year, you've broken some streaks and beaten yourself up about it. What are some like top 3 things that you have learned that has like really helped your music making?
It's a fairly kind of a bit of a no shit response, but the do the thing, right? Like actually make music, and I'm very, very bad. Like I don't think I released anything at all in 2023. I surely haven't released anything in 2025. So like I only create stuff during weekly beats pretty much. So it's just actually sitting down and opening up whatever workspace you're in to make music. And I guess the kind of coming off of that, another one would be like, don't beat yourself up about whatever random garbage comes out the other end, right? Like I was talking about on Discord yesterday, like I've got a track literally called Garbage from 2022 or something. And I think my comment on it was like, ugh, like yucky. But then all the comments are like, yeah, this is awesome. And you're like, hey, whatever.
Yeah.
Sure, I guess. Someone's going to appreciate some part of it. Or at the very least, they're going to, it's going to, we think about art at the very like basic level to create emotions and create a response in someone who consumes it. Even if you pull stretch like a Bell sample, someone's gonna listen to it and be like, oh yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Like you'll get something.
Somebody's gonna dig it.
Yeah. So that's a big thing. I'm trying to think for the third one. Like, I don't know. I want to say two completely opposing things almost. Like one is like one of my classic. So Weekly Beats deadline is Monday morning around about now for
Right,
us
yeah, yeah.
Australians. So you pretty much have to do it on Sunday night, otherwise, it's done anyway. So you don't get that extra time, right? But one of the things that I often do is like what I call the 3 preset challenge. When I've got half an hour left before I have to submit my weekly beats, and that's in FL Studio. There's uh, an instrument called Flex, which it's like part Rompler, part synthesizer. It's just a preset engine basically, and it gives you some things you can tweak in each individual preset. And there's a random button to pick a random patch out of all of the things that you have in Flex. So I'll do like, create 3 tracks, hit random 3 times, get 3 things, and then just make whatever the hell I want to make. Right. And that's really like, sometimes I make some real bangers out of that. So that's cool. But then the other thing I want to like kind of, or that I feel like I maybe haven't done, but want to do more based on my experience in Weekly Beats is like just do some weird experimental shit. Like, just, I don't know, pick a random synth sound and then like a super massive on it or something like that. And just make something weird. Because even if it is just an echoey, like 1 minute long track, like as long as
Yeah.
you're putting some sort of yourself into it, I think that's the value, right?
Yeah, I definitely want to try to do some weird shit next year. Like I definitely stayed in a lane and like maybe not necessarily weighed other people's expectations on the output, but like I I guess I felt like I couldn't get too weird because I had to still output something that I thought was decent.
And I think, I don't know. I know this isn't true for people who really know how to use, like, are really, really into trackers, but like, I feel like that part of the reason I never really got into trackers, M8, all that sort of stuff, is it feels like it pushes you towards a certain kind of approach to making music. Well, I mean, it obviously does because it's literally a spreadsheet, but like I feel like it's easy to make certain kinds of music, right? So you tend to drift towards that. But one of the things I'm really interested in with the M8 is the ability for like I can't remember who it is, someone on YouTube, someone in the Dirty Wave community was doing generative stuff on the M8 with the random controls. And I think that's really, really exciting because that's something that's much harder to do in a typical like piano roll timeline kind of DAW setup.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm kind of looking forward to playing around with my M8 headless thingy.
You just got a headless setup, right?
Yeah. It's basically it's a like, what do you call it? Like a random Chinese little like Game Boy
Like,
clone thing. And then you just slap the teensy on the back. And
was it hard to get that set up?
You do need to know how to solder. Other than that, not really. It's just a printer helps because you can print an enclosure for the back. There's a guy in the Dirty Wave community, Metrograde, who's got he's got tutorials and stuff online. You can download the print files. So yeah, it's pretty easy. Obviously, the downside is it's not an M8, so like it's very, very fiddly. Like the controls are so much smaller, and they're not as nice and stuff like that. So I think it fits nicely within the like try out the M8 workflow before you go off and buy the actual hardware. Because like I've tried trackers in the past and I have never gelled with them. So the thought of spending, I think it's like $1,100 Australian for the M8 Model 2. I was like, it's not really viable, but I think my total cost on this was about $150.
Reasonable, yes.
Yeah, pretty reasonable. And now I can play around with it.
I think a better way to test headless than Like when I got the headless, it was still like, all right, you're on your computer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I don't want to be here.
Yeah. So I got the Teensy and I plugged it in to the computer and I opened up M8 Run and I was looking at it. I'm like, wow, this is still just a tracker. I hate this. And I was like, if I'm going to use the M8 at all, it's going to have to be portable, right? So,
yeah.
I ended up not using it for a couple of weeks until I got the Game Boy stuff in. And
no, that's cool. I'm excited to hear how you like it coming from a tracker hater.
yeah, it's and I think the only thing that's going to save it from my perspective is, like I said, that like generative stuff that I can't easily do in my DAW as well. And inspired by what you've always been saying on the podcast of like take it to bed and play around.
Yeah,
with it,
like I had to go do jury duty this week on Thursday.
Fun.
And yeah, it was a blast. But I took my M8, so like every extra bit of time that I had to fill, I was like, psh, and I've like almost wrote a whole song.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is pretty sweet.
Yeah, for sure. And last night I finally set it up yesterday properly in its portable sense. And took it to bed last night and got some weird sort of just playing around with the effects and stuff like that and got some stuff that sounded cool. And I was like, awesome. If I hadn't done this, I would have been watching YouTube or like playing Morrowind on my Steam Deck, which is, don't get me wrong, as valuable as playing around with the M8, but it's different,
Well, and then I like it before bed because like then you can make all this stuff that you're like, God, I feel good going to bed because I made some bangers, and then you wake up in the morning and you're like, well, we'll try it again tonight.
Yeah. There's always another day.
Yeah. So, well, should we get into some of the music?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Should we start out first with oh wait, I think I put these in the wrong order. All right, should we start out first with Inner Revolution?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's go. That was Inner Revolution featuring Hatsume Miku. Am I saying that correctly?
Hatsune Miku.
Hatsune Miku. Which is Vocaloid.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. The Vocaloid, really.
The Vocaloid.
Well, that's my opinion, but definitely the most well-known Vocaloid, I suppose, is probably the best way to put it.
What made this one of your picks?
So this is the first track of 2024 for me. I guess there's kind of a few. I felt like I had to include a Miku track. It's pretty important. So that was always going to be in here, but it's also like, so last 2023 was a pretty rough year, and so this track was sort of like the first time I ever wrote lyrics that were actually like meaningful and not just random garbage about trains. Things that like I was actually feeling and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's one of those, you talk a lot on the podcast about the kind of the diary aspect of Weekly Beats. And even though I have, a smaller amount of diary entries every year than 52, it's still one of those ones that really like takes me back to how I was feeling.
Yeah.
In that moment. It's long story short, basically just felt like I was in a rut.
This was like a kind of like a rebirth.
That was the thought. Yeah. So I sort of, I was in like I said before, I'm in games, and in games, layoffs are just the thing that happens, right? I mean, IT in general, and so the company that I was in was kind of taking a nosedive, but I was still there, but really feeling a bit shit and not really engaging with any of my hobbies really at all, and just feeling a bit crap. So it was one that was kind of like this is sort of talking about how I'm feeling, but also talking about, wanting to move forward. And I don't think that didn't really happen last year, but definitely happened this year. So that's good. And highly recommend, for me, at least it worked really well, is that ADHD diagnosis, because it's turned my life around for sure.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. It explained a lot of things. Huh?
It really did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things that's just so crazy to just be like living with it for so long. And
like,
then
why do I have so many hobbies?
That, and like, why don't I do any of them? And why do I find it so hard to do the things that I know I really enjoy? And and just that light switch moment as soon as it kind of, you get medicated and it's like, oh crap. Because I feel like, I think like I had these coping mechanisms, right, throughout my life that I could still produce things. And like 2012, for example, I didn't finish Weekly Beats that year, but I released like, there was a comment, I was looking through the comments, and there was a comment where I was like, someone said, oh, you should increase the volume of the kick on this track. And so I had clearly like gone and like made a new track and released it to YouTube, and then linked it in the comment to be like, hey, what about this one instead? And so I was like making more music than Weekly Beats during a Weekly Beats year, which is crazy to me now. But like I was doing all this stuff, but I think like, with the kind of the mental health and the being in a company that's kind of a miserable place to be, I feel like all my coping mechanisms just sort of disintegrated.
Yeah.
So yeah, 2024 was a bit of a rough year for me, I guess, mentally. But the track is not totally like melancholy. There's a hint of hope for the future
and moving forward. And
exactly. And I think it's also, so I do a lot of Vocaloid tracks, not so much last year actually, but definitely 2020, 2022, like half my tracks were all like Miku stuff. And this is the first one that I kind of really felt like this actually came together as a pretty well produced track. Whereas the other ones always had like something in them that I hated. So
Well, I mean, on that note, I want to read a comment from Replicator
mm,
on that track, and he said, "Wow, this is a complete, well-produced track, a very strong start to the year, and relatable lyrics for sure." So,
yeah.
high praise from Replicator,
Oh yes.
and that should beat your imposter syndrome to absolute shit, because it is a very well produced track. And to hear someone say, uh like, I have imposter syndrome, I don't know that I can like create well produced tracks, like, man, you like, everyone that
Yeah.
I listen to is great.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
not true. But it's it's the yeah, I don't know. I think the problem is for me as well, and this is one of the really cool things about Weekly Beats in particular, is I spend a lot of my time comparing myself to what I hear in my playlist that I listen to, right? So like,
Yeah.
I'm comparing my music to like Armin van Buren and Tiesto and like these like tracks that have had extremely competent mastering engineers and like all of this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's like, oh, well, my stuff sounds awful in comparison. But with Weekly Beats, it's like you're hearing stuff that everyone has sort of put together in a week, and you're seeing kind of the raw output, not the, I guess, the
Yeah.
polished output.
It hasn't gone through polishing with mastering engineers, and yeah.
Yeah. So it feels like a lot more, like I feel like I'm a lot more, that sense of imposter syndrome just kind of disappears, right? And like,
Yeah.
we're all making kind of weird and not quite
Everyone's
complete
working
stuff.
under similar constraints.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think that the differences between, some other people's music on Weekly Beats and my own is that, I guess, that heavier, like that stronger focus, right? Like music is really what drives them. And so I think that shows in their music compared to mine, which is not to say that sometimes I don't put out like a top rate banger, right? Like sometimes
Yeah.
I put
Yeah.
all of that focus into that track, and I feel like that shows in some cases. And in some
Yeah.
cases, I don't put any effort at all in, and people are like, this is the greatest thing you've ever released. So
It's weird. It's weird. Yeah. But I mean, it's a danceable song with a good message and a journal entry for you, kind
yeah,
of starting the year and putting your heart into this song.
yeah, for sure. I think also it's a my whole thing, and this is something that didn't really come up last year at all, I think, but my whole thing with Miku tracks has always been like goofy, like Miku and also trains is kind of the thing that I've been combining. So like I think my second track for 2020 was called, I was going to put it in, but yeah, no. Is
We
like
only have
literally
so much time.
exactly right. Is called like Tootie Boy, and it's basically just her singing about trains, and then there's like a horn break in the middle, and like it's
Nice.
awesome, it's fantastic, but it's also like stupid as all hell. Like it's there's no like passion put into that other than the like mildly autistic I love trains type passion, right? Like
And this was like your first Miku breakthrough heartfelt
yeah,
song.
I think for one that's fully self-produced, like in Mission Crossings episode, he mentioned multiple times, good on him, the collaboration we did where I like remixed one of his tracks from Weekly Beats and put Miku vocals on it, and then we got a couple of other Weekly Beats people to do remixes of it and release that on Spotify. And that I felt was like a really cool, like that to me felt like my first like real track with Miku vocals on it. But this one is obviously fully self-produced, so it feels a little bit more important to me, I suppose.
Yeah.
I also think a lot about there's like the synth chords that are like kind of like an accordion in that track. Sort of. I don't even really know how to describe them, but I think about them a lot. And I don't know where they're from. They're probably from like Flex, but like they just sound cool. Like, when did accordion start sounding so cool?
With Miku vocals.
Apparently, yeah.
Yeah. All right, we're going to keep it moving and listen to Luma.
Nice.
All right, that was from week 15, Luma. I love the like tape warble and static on that pad. Like, it just sounds amazing. So tell me a little bit more about this one.
Yeah, so I guess procedural stuff out of the way, right? I think everything apart from the drums on this track were from Decent Sampler, which is David Hollowitz, the dude on YouTube who samples all the stuff. He it's got a bunch of like packs in it that you can get, and there's just a couple of really vibey stuff in there that I really enjoyed. But yeah, I guess coming off of that feeling from Inner Revolution, start of the year, week 15's what, third of the way through the year, about.
Yeah, ish.
And yeah, this is one of those ones where like it was really what I was feeling that week, right? It's just like I got in the door and I just like, it's kind of a mix of like almost like empty space and just like nothing, but also like kind of melancholy vibe. And
we're not dancing this week.
And I think it's a funny little, like, if you look at my Weekly Beats tracks for 2024 and you look at the names of them, anything that's got like the name of the week in it is like one that I was like, put it out there, but I wasn't super happy with it. So only the ones that are like just fully named, like Inner Revolution.
So like all the week whatever with a name,
Yeah,
you were like, eh.
Yeah, or I just chucked a random name on it, right? Whereas the other ones I like named properly and all that sort of stuff. So this one was one that has week 15 in it, although again, in hindsight, I go back and I go, actually, this is one of my favorite tracks of 2024.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But you'll also note there's no like comment, there's no like description on the track. It was just like I uploaded it and then closed it and then, I don't know, went to bed or something. Like it was rough. And I think if you look at like the timeline of like my descriptions as the year goes on, they get like less and less descriptive. It starts to become like, I think the one after this is just like, I don't know, like
just like doing the thing.
Just getting the reps in, right? But yeah, I think it's one of those ones that in particular when I go back and listen to it, it's almost makes me want to cry, right? Like just coming back to that moment. And it wasn't like there wasn't like anything in particular going on at the time. It was just low in general.
One of those moments.
Yeah. So it's very very poignant, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it also, it just sounds good. And I can't really take ownership of that. Obviously, like I said, I put it together, but so much of those sounds are just what was coming out of that decent sample of EST, which was just like vibey as hell.
Well, assembled vibey as hell.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because if you can't take credit for this, then you can't take credit for presets.
Yeah. Which means I can't take credit for pretty much anything I make. So. Yeah.
I'm trying to convince you of the opposite, not to stop making music, just for note.
Yeah, that's fair. But I think it also kind of speaks to like what I'm trying to do with music typically is to create like a space to inhabit. Like I'm always trying to bring you into another world or something like that. For most of my tracks, sometimes I just make like a trance banger, but like I guess part of trance is also doing that. So, whatever. But like
I would agree, yeah.
Yeah, it's like whatever the listener, like whatever world it transports the listener to is on them, right? It's their interpretation of it, but kind of giving them the I don't know, the lines on the side of the road of like is where I'm headed, and you can kind of come down here as well if you want, or head off road and do whatever you own. But this is kind of
the environment for them to inhabit, but they can experience the environment however they want.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. And I didn't really talk about it when we we're talking about Inner Revolution, but I don't speak Japanese, despite being a huge weeb. I've never sat down and learned Japanese, but most of my Miku tracks are in Japanese. And part of that is I consider it more of a instrument than a vocalist. And so being able to have the lyrics in a language that, even though I know what the lyrics are because I obviously wrote them, I don't cognitively understand them as they're being said to me. I think also helps that feeling of like the song can kind of mean whatever you want it to mean to you. And if you want to know what it means to me, you can go and look up the lyrics.
That is really cool because, I don't understand Japanese either, but it's still beautiful to listen to. And that's a really cool way of putting it, that like you can interpret it however you want, or you can read the translation to see like kind of what it meant for you.
Yeah, and a lot of the time, like you go and read the translation, you're like, that was about teacups or something, like completely
trains again, huh?
Yeah, trains again. Yeah. Well, I've got a track that's like a 2020, I think, is like guitar loops from Splice and like Miku doing like a singer-songwriter style thing over the top of it, and the lyrics are like, it's like very solemn and kind of down tempo, but she's just singing about like getting on the train and going to Sapporo or something like that. It's like, yeah, okay. But that happens all the time with like, J-rock and even like K-pop and stuff like that. You're like, oh, this is really cool. And then you go and look at what they're talking about. And you're like, oh, I don't relate to that at all.
But I've also talked about this before where like in writing lyrics in English, you like everyone tries to kind of make them a little bit cryptic so you can make your own meaning out of them.
Yeah.
But there's like that fine line between cryptic and odd,
Yeah.
or never being able to decipher your original intent from the beginning.
Yeah. And I think also you get that like sometimes you read lyrics and you're like, that's really wanky. Like
Yeah.
you could have just said like, I love you instead of, I would take 1,000 bullets for you or whatever. Like it's kind of
Right.
like,
Yeah.
okay, cool. That's great. But if you put that into another language, it's kind of like, I feel like when you translate it back, when the listener goes back and reads it, you're like, you can kind of almost separate it and you're like, okay, well, it's probably just a weird, like a translation. It can't be translated 1-to-1, even though it was 100% what you originally wrote was, yeah. It's fun. And I feel like it's one of those things that you can kind of, like whenever I release a track outside of Weekly Beats onto like Spotify or something, I always get someone to actually do a proper translation instead of Google Translate or something. Just so if anyone who does actually have it as a native language listens to it, it's not complete like nonsense.
Yeah. They're like, what the heck?
Yeah.
This is obviously Google Translate.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's really cool. All right, we're going to move along to Flashback.
Okay. Nice.
That was Flashback. What made that one of your three?
I feel like Flashback is, and I don't know if it's intentional when I named it, but pretty much speaks to what I make, or at least what I've traditionally made as an artist. I was heavily inspired by Armin van Buuren when I started making music. And in fact, one of the reasons I started making music originally was I heard, I can't remember, it was one of the tracks on one of his early albums. And I was like, I could totally make that. Because
I can do that.
there's like 4 instruments in it. I'm like, well, if he can do it, I can do it, right? And so a lot of what I spent my early, or a lot of my early tracks that I made were remixes of trance and other stuff. Shout out to Nonstop 2K for all of their MIDIs that you can download. But yeah, so I feel like throughout all of my sort of musical career, if you will, trance has sort of been my go-to. If I don't know what I want to do, I'm going to make a trance track or something adjacent to it. And so this was kind of, I don't know if I really set out to do this when I made it, but I guess in retrospect, it feels like this is the kind of quality that I can make now compared to the stuff that I was making earlier. But then on the other hand, I listen to it, I'm like, this is definitely a Weekly Beats track, because there's like, I missed like a transition effect or something here or something like that.
I see.
But yeah, I think it's just kind of a banger, really. There's not much.
Yeah, and I mean, it is a banger. And we were talking during the portion when we listened to the song and chop it out about going back and listening to some of your older stuff to maybe pick for this show. And you didn't really like the older stuff, it sounded like.
Yeah.
So, like, how do you think you've grown as even a hobbyist uh, music maker,
Yeah.
even in 2024? Like, how have you grown, and like, what have you noticed about like your what has changed?
Yeah, it's interesting because the main thing is the quality of the sound, I guess. I feel like when I was listening to my 2012 tracks, there was like the chord progressions, the melodies, all that sort of stuff was still, I think, quite good. They were repetitive, but like trance is repetitive often, so whatever.
Yeah.
But the kind of, they were super duper muddy, and I feel like my stuff is still quite muddy. Like I barely do any mixing, and my mastering chain is isotope ozone, and then I do the AI master button, and then I render it. So like I'm still not super happy with how things sound from that point of view, but there was a lot more like just so much bass in the old stuff that it was just like, my speakers are vibrating, but I'm not really feeling any of it type
Yeah.
stuff like that. But also I look back to stuff because like I said before, I released so much music in 2012, 2011. I was doing so much, and it was all quite similar in that it was all kind of trance adjacent. But like, I look back at that and go, like, if I had that kind of creative drive to make music still, like, man, I'd be killing Weekly Beats. Like, I wouldn't have a problem doing 52 in a year, right? But again,
Yeah.
I think I said earlier, like that shift from music being my creative outlet to games being my creative outlet has just meant that I don't have as much time for music.
Yeah.
And by time, I mean like drive to sit down and do music versus game dev, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think overall it feels like a more quality track than anything I released in 2012, but I don't think it's necessarily a more competent track from the standpoint of like arrangement or chord progression or anything like that.
Like, your mixing, mastering, producing workflow has gotten better,
Yeah.
but you're still kind of assembling things in a similar way.
Yeah. And I think that makes sense, right? It's like doing weekly beats, a lot of it is that, like, or the big part of what you're doing the same every single week is that kind of second half of the production, right? Of the
Yeah.
how things sound at the other end. Whereas I think often when it's not timed, you're spending a lot more time in the earlier section, or at least I do,
Yeah.
building up weird stuff. So I feel like it's one of those things where if I had spent more time becoming more musical, then that would be reflected more now. But because I've just spent more time doing that repetition of just releasing stuff, the result is that the stuff sounds better, but is not necessarily, structurally better. Although it's a better, like, better collection of sounds and all that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah.
Helps a
I
lot.
mean, I'm sure there are more overall improvements than your imposter syndrome is letting you own up to.
Yeah.
Where do you kind of want to go for 2026? Like, if you had like one overarching theme of like, this is like, what do I want to accomplish even if I don't do 52 weeks in a row? Like,
Yeah.
here's where I want to feel like I got to.
So, and I probably should have said this earlier when I was talking about it, but like, my goal is not 52 weeks, because I think that's, again, it's just not feasible for me to set that as a goal and actually meet it. But my goal is always to do more than I did the previous weekly weeks, and so that gives me a lot more leeway, and that I can take a break and come back to it, right?
Yeah.
And also, I think probably, I can just do stuff even if it's not for weekly beats. But anyway, I think the big thing for me next year is going to be hardware.
Yeah.
So
Bleeps and bloops.
Bleeps and bloops. It's going to be. So I just recently finished setting up. Well, I didn't finish setting up, but I finished building the furniture for my little home studio, which I've never really had, which is just a desk next to the desk I'm currently sitting at. But it's
a dedicated desk is important.
exactly.
I've got one right here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's going to have, obviously, my modular setup. It's going to have a keyboard and stuff like that on it, and a separate computer specifically for music. So, yeah, hardware, I guess, is the main thing. Like, just getting out of the door. I'll still be in FL Studio for sure, or potentially another door
But
if I try that out.
You're going to be getting weird on hardware.
I think so. And there's a couple of other pieces of hardware I want to pick up next year.
Oh, I bet.
Memorandum on picking up any more hardware this year, but next year, actually, that's a lie. I've already made the commitment that if I find a cheap FX module, I'm going to buy it. But
yeah, I know. I was watching all the Super Booth stuff, and I was like, should I get into modular? And I was like, no.
I highly don't recommend it. But it's so cool though. It's just because I'm like into electronics and stuff as well, so it's kind of touches on that side of the stuff I'm into. It's really good, but I do want to get some. Like, I was looking at like the Behringer Crave, and there's like 3 other instruments in that line. They're like little boxes with CV outs, so I can hook them into the modular as well.
I love little boxes.
Yeah, little boxes would be good.
Yeah. All right. Well, we could talk about gear we want to buy for like 4 hours.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna move on to my picks now.
Mm-hmm.
So this one is, let me make sure I get the whole name right here. Week 18, the kind of shit you hear on the radio driving at 3 a.m. on the expressway.
Nice.
Let's go. that was the kind of shit that you hear on the radio driving at 3 a.m. on the expressway. And I love it. The title matches the vibe, and boy, is it a vibe.
Yeah,
I just really love this one.
it's definitely. I think my comment, my description for that one is this is genre music. This is the new genre. But it does. It reminds me of there's a radio station here in Adelaide called Fresh 92.7. It's like a non-profit. They mostly play like EDM and stuff like that. But then at night they always get these like house like vibey DJs on really late at night. So
Yeah.
this is like looking out the window at like, lights going past type music for
The
me.
city
Yeah.
rolling by.
Yeah. Yeah. As I was saying to you in our little break there, it was this is the perfect example of something that like you don't put much effort into, and then everyone's super into it. which is not to say I'm not into it as well, but like my feelings on it are very different because this is. So I just checked, and it's a 40-minute track, but I don't necessarily believe that. So this was definitely
40 minutes to complete.
40 minutes from the moment I opened FL Studio to the moment I closed it afterwards.
God damn.
It is probably more than three, but 3 sets of loops from Splice, and that's it.
Man.
It's just
Man.
And shout out to the on Splice. There's this I can't remember what it's called, but you can like click a thing and it just loads up a bunch of random loops and then plays them.
And that's what you hit, and it loaded up these random loops.
It didn't load those up specifically, but through a bunch of hitting that random button, I picked out a bunch that sounded cool.
Wow.
Yeah,
man.
So and that's the thing. It's like this is in particular one I feel like I can't take too much credit for, right? Because I didn't really do much except arrange a couple of loops, but it is.
Somebody had to put them together.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't exist until I did that, right? So
yeah.
There's that. Those loops weren't from the same pack or anything like that, right? So but there's a non-zero chance you go on SoundCloud and you hear a very similar song from someone else. But I think it's as much as I joke about it not being a thing that I made necessarily. Obviously, I put it together with thoughts in mind, right? Like it's
yeah. And it sounds great. And I don't like it any less knowing the background behind it, and I don't think any less of it
and
based on the time that it took you to make or the time that it didn't take you to make.
There's a good video from I want to say Alex. I don't know. He's Alex something. He's on YouTube, synth guy. He's got tons of synths, and he does a little series where he shows you how they made the sounds in really popular tracks. Right? He did one on the it was either the Prodigy or Fatboy Slim. I can't remember which one, but he's like, yeah, this track is just this preset. And then you're like, oh, that's literally the entire track is just this preset and then a drum loop on top. And you're like, okay, that was like one of the biggest tracks of 2000.
Yeah. All right. Other big people do it too.
That's it.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. It's a vibe. But it's also, it's weird because it's also super divorced from like the stuff I would actually make if I was putting it all together from scratch. Like, I think it sounds really cool, but I wouldn't even know where to start, really, to do that stuff.
Because would you kind of go more like the dancey track direction?
That definitely, yeah, that would be part of it. But also, I would lean towards space sounds rather than, I don't know, what do you call this? Like, kind of like down tempo, like vaporwave kind of vibe to it.
Yeah. You would make it a little bit more like reverby, less like chord stab sort of.
Exactly, yeah. And I'd have, there'd be some sort of synth soaring in from the top and
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff.
Well, we await the remix.
But here's the problem: I won't be able to talk to the creator and get the the MIDI, the chord.
Yeah,
It'd be too hard for
man,
me.
that's true. All right, well, it will live on as it is.
It will.
All right, we're gonna go to another vibe.
Mm.
Week 10. Let's find a new burger joint.
Hey.
Let's go. All right, we got to stop this because I need to go find a new burger joint. Uh, no, that is another vibe. I get some like funk, almost like Silk Sonic
Mm-hmm.
vibes from it. I think it's the bass and
The
the keys.
yeah, the working title in FL Studio for that one, the project name is literally just funk. So
Perfect. Tell me about the making of this one.
yeah, so interestingly, I literally just got done saying I would never make a track like the last one if I sat down and made it. But I also don't really feel like I would have made this either. And yet, I think the only loop in this is the drums. So
Because they are similar.
yeah, I totally see what you mean.
Ish.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not trance.
No, they're not.
There's no Miku.
No. No, there's actual humans doing the voices in both of those, which is crazy.
Humans.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that you like this isn't just a collection of splice samples.
Yeah. So I think this is I mentioned before I used to play bass. So I like a good bass line, right?
Yeah.
And I think this was probably I don't know, but I have a feeling it was probably I found the drums on Splice, and I was like, okay, I guess I'll make like a funky track. Like,
Yeah.
very much like this is very much in the speed trash category for me. Which, as we all know by now, for listeners of the podcast, speed trash doesn't mean bad. It just means
No.
made on Sunday. But yeah, so I'm pretty sure I started with the drums and the bass line and then just kind of built up from that. But I think I do remember having that moment where I was like, chuck in that hey kind of
Yeah, it is a nice touch.
was it gang vocal or whatever you call it? And it's like, yeah, that's
Hey.
it. That's the track. And I love the the very kind of 70s-ish kind of lead sounds that comes in over the top. That's my shit right there.
Yeah. So what made it possible to make this thing that you were like, I can't see myself sitting down and making something like this?
I think,
Is it just like the drums that kind of set the stage?
yeah, I like to think that I'm not set in specifically the type of music I will make when I sit down to make a track. It's just that I tend to gravitate towards other things,
Mm-hmm.
even though it is like not trance. It's still very much like electronic pop music, right? Like it's using a bass sound that is realistic, but not necessarily actually a bass. Maybe it is like that. I don't know, but it's still very like pop music type funk
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like actual funk, right? And so that still kind of aligns, I think, in the kind of the trance space, in that it's still like four to the floor. It's still pretty simple progression, all that sort of stuff. But I think whereas the last track is very much of like you're like living in a space. This one is just kind of like cool music, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so I feel like sometimes you just sit down and you're like, let's just make a bop, right? Like
Yeah.
let's leave all this like trying to transport the listener into somewhere in particular, and let's just make them nod their head and get down
Yeah.
and jiggy with it, right?
Sometimes you need to just go find a new burger joint, and other
Exactly.
times you need to travel through space and dimensions.
Exactly. And yeah, like I err towards the latter generally. Like I feel like that's my
Yeah.
brand, but you know, you can't be stuck making the same stuff all the time, right?
No, no. And it's it's cool that you can break out and kind of do these different styles,
Hmm.
because I feel like I make a lot of the same kind of stuff
Yeah.
that I'm trying to figure out, like, how can I break out of that and do some experiments to take me in different directions?
Yeah. And I think for me, a lot of that inspiration does come from a stuff I'm listening to, right? Just generally day to day, but also opening up Splice, seeing you have 8,000 credits and being like, I should probably use some of these, and just listening to a
Yeah.
bunch of just random loops and getting inspired by those loops, I think helps a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's also like, I guess my advice would be don't try and like that track. If I'd tried to make an actual like, Stevie Wonder type thing, it wouldn't ever happen, right?
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, let's make an electronic track that has the
Some elements.
yeah, the elements of the costume of funk, if you will, and
Yeah, I like that
yeah.
costume.
So there's really only a couple of elements in there that I've changed from my normal kind of approach to making music. So that reduces the amount of, I guess, lack of comfort going to a different area. But also, if you asked me to make that track again, I probably couldn't. So like, like if someone heard that and they're like, "Cool, I really want you to make, I don't know, music for my game or something that's all like this," I'd be like, I can't do
I
that.
don't know. Here's this one.
Yeah, that's the only one I got. Maybe there'll be another one in a few years' time, but you know, can't.
Yeah, people talk about, like, if you want to kind of break out of the box, like, try to emulate
Hmm.
a particular song, kind of like I think Neon Liminal was saying this, like, use a reference track more for, he was talking more for like mixing, mastering. But I personally just have a real hard time of like trying to match other styles to my music, that's
Yeah,
that's not how I go about making music.
I think. Yeah, and it is hard, and it depends a lot on the genre of music as well. Like certain kinds of music are going to have so many different elements in them that make up the sound that comes out the other end that it's really hard to break down and actually copy. But I the thing that really worked for me kind of long term, that I think the reason why I was able to sort of, I guess, get started with like being able to arrange songs in ways that I think are pleasant, is not so much taking songs and trying to replicate them, but taking the actual like the melodies, the MIDI data effectively of those tracks and
Okay,
changing
yeah.
that to something that sounds more like what you want, right? So, like I said before, I was doing a lot of like remixes of Armin van Buuren and Tiesto and stuff like that, most of which somehow are still on YouTube and not being removed. But
Shh.
yeah, it's like, so they end up sounding quite similar to the original track, but, I've included my own breakdown, or I've changed up the instruments to sound different, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That, I think, gives you space to play around with different things. One of the, I think actually kind of similar to this track now I think about it, I did like a remix of a K-pop track many, 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 many years ago now. And it was just like, what if this K-pop track was like Earth, Wind and Fire type thing? Yeah, so I don't know. I don't think there's a way to approach branching out. And
Do you think doing those remixes and, like you said, changing, like, what if I put a breakdown here, or what if I change this one section? Do you think that was like, has really helped you refine your own song structure and composition?
yeah, I feel like, and that's one of the things listening back to those 2012 tracks, is I feel like the structure of those tracks is really good. And I think that is based entirely on the fact that I spent so long working with other people's like chord progressions and
Yeah.
melodies and stuff, and just rearranging them in ways that made sense to me. So I think so. But it is one of those things that it's particularly hard with weekly beats, but also just the modern copyright space in general to like release that stuff.
Mhm.
So like,
Yeah.
we can't really do remixes on weekly beats unless they're of other weekly beats tracks.
Yeah.
And then if you try and put that stuff on YouTube or Spotify or something, it'll get killed. So it's hard to like do it and then
Yeah.
release it and then
It's
which
hard to do that sort of like exercise in research in a way that you can show other people these days.
yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. Which is unfortunate. I mean, I guess we have
Yeah.
past the era of sampling and flipping
Sample
whatever.
flipping, yeah. I mean, yeah, unless you are willing to pay for it.
Yeah. But now the AI bots will catch like every little snippet and
Yep.
like locate exactly where it came from.
And even better, we won't even need to make the music anymore. So because the AI can do that too. So like
It's true.
we're living in such a fantastic place where the thing that we really love to do, we can just automate that and get rid of it and then do
Yeah,
nothing with it.
and then we can put iPhones together. I
Yeah.
think that'll be fun.
Well, I don't know,
Yeah.
because I feel like a computer could probably do that pretty well too, right? So
So
maybe
what are we gonna do?
I think I think what we're going to do is we're all going to become massive and float around on like chairs in space, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
Wally approach to humanity.
Oh man, this is taking a dark turn. I kind of don't want to think about the future, actually,
Well, that's really
except for
unfortunate.
2026 weekly beats. That's the
Yeah.
future I want to think about.
Well, unfortunately, we left one of my space tracks for last,
Oh,
which is
man,
about the future and is not actually a pleasant future. So
great, great.
perfect.
And the final one we have is, am I saying it right? In Koji 6.
Yeah. I mean, I made the word up, so
Oh, okay. I didn't
yeah.
know. You're a man of culture,
I
so
mean, it
I
could be Japanese. It's definitely vaguely Japanese, so it may actually
that's
be a
what I
word.
was thinking.
Yeah.
It was vaguely Japanese, and I was like, I don't know Japanese.
Hmm.
Maybe you translated it. Well, we will play this one out. We are at the end of our episode.
Hmm.
I picked Enkoji 6 because it is another, uh, I guess, vibe track.
Mm.
It's got just a great feel to it, different vibe than the last two we listened to, but also not trance.
Mm.
So I don't know. I just really like it. Tell me about how this one came together.
Yeah. So I feel like for me, there's all good things come in threes, right? Triangle is the strongest shape, all that good stuff. And so for me, I feel like there's three kind of main things that I do or that I enjoy making. Trance is one of them. Weird, goofy stuff with Miku is another one. And the third one, which is something that I've been doing since forever, basically, started making music, is making these like, I always call them like spacey, soundtracky type tracks. And there needs to be a better like name for that, but I haven't worked it out yet.
I'm
So
sure there is, but I'm terrible at
yeah,
genre song classifications. So
please someone tell me because I'm sick of saying spacey, soundtracky. But yeah, just things that I'm a big sci-fi geek, so like I've always been into Star Wars and all that good stuff. But just building out, we talk about transporting the listener to a different place is a really big kind of thing I'm into doing. So excuse me. Often it turns into often it does a beat does drop eventually, but sometimes it's quite down tempo like this and um yeah, I don't know. It's I released an album on Spotify in 21 or something, made up of a bunch of tracks like this. And it's all kind of very, very loosely in one universe, like ever since I started writing it 12 years ago, or whatever. So it's a very, you can't draw a line between any of these tracks, but like they all kind of have the same vibe of
yeah, yeah,
this like humans in space across the galaxy. There's maybe aliens, maybe there isn't aliens, but there's definitely humans fighting other humans. And I just make a cool track. And usually what I do is I make the track and then I kind of assign a story to it almost. So, like in the description of this one, I've written a little kind of paragraph of just sort of vibe text to sort of help, again, like we were saying before, guide the
yeah,
viewer towards or the listener towards what I was kind of feeling as I was making it. And it's one of those things that I like when I go back and listen to other tracks like this. I often do it on Weekly Beats specifically rather than if it's on Spotify or whatever, because of those little text snippets, so I can like read it as it's playing and kind of transport myself back to what I was feeling
yeah.
then as
That's
well.
cool.
And I often get like like goosebumps reading the stuff and how it hooks
That's
up to the
cool.
music. So yeah, it's a real like, I think it touches on my like like tabletop role playing game GM sort of fiction writing creative stuff. It all kind of mashes together,
Yeah.
right? It's like I could see this stuff being in a game that I built as well as a story that I
Oh,
wrote and
for
all that sort of
sure.
stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I commented on this one when you released it that it sounds like a movie soundtrack.
Mm,
That it was spacious and wide.
yeah, and I appreciate that. I was trying to think, like I don't know where this would be in a movie. If like I agree that like soundtracky for sure, but I'm trying to imagine like where would you play this type of track in a
Yeah.
movie? And that question in its own right is like super interesting to me. Like trying to work out what would this movie actually look like, and where would we play this in that movie?
Yeah,
Um,
that is an interesting thing to think about.
one of the things I really want to do at some point, and I started doing it, you know, life is building. Have you ever listened to the Blade Runner soundtrack?
Yes.
Yeah, so they interleave like audio from the movie, the dialogue, all that sort of stuff. I've always wanted to make an album, a concept album like that. And who was it that you had on here? Oh, I'm having a mental blank. One of the previous guests. Crap, I'm scrambling now.
Oh man, I could read them off.
I should really remember. Was it
Xavier?
Was it Xavier? Man, I can't remember. Jupiter
He
was. Jupiter
makes
was
very
the.
like soundtrack.
Yeah, I think it was. Jupiter Music is the. Yes, it's Xavier. I just went to the Bandcamp. Sorry, Xavier. They, because he works with his brother or a friend or something like that to do quite similar stuff. And when that episode was, I was listening to that episode, I was like, yeah, this is, I need to do this. Very inspiring. And that, those very kind of the people talking to each other and like things like that. I just think that'd be really cool. And that's where I kind of feel like this sort of music, because when it's in a movie, you're thinking about what visuals are going with it, right? And that to me is quite hard to it's quite hard to visualize exactly what you'd be seeing on screen in the context of a movie. But when you're just listening to it and kind of coming up with your own visuals for what's going on, and it's like the whole experience is listening to this.
Yeah.
I feel like it fits a bit better. So
I also think it's cool that you make the song and then kind of like build this world for it. So like when you are making a track like this versus like a trance track, like what do you start with? Like how do you set out to make something like this? Like what is that process like?
Almost always with these ones, I open up one of my VSTs, I scroll through a bunch of presets, and then I hit Q on my keyboard, which plays, I think, C5. And then I go, wow, that sounds fucking awesome. And then the rest of the track just follows.
That's cool. That's cool.
So, and that's part of why I started getting into modular, is I want to be able to make that kind of thing and be able to tweak it and make it more of my own, which is again why I need an FX module. So
you do.
So I think it's very much we start from a single sound and we build like what suits this sound. Like where are we in the world hearing this sound, or what does it complement? So a lot of the time it's like, I'm trying to remember for this track in particular, but it's one of the sounds in here. I think it was the bells at the start, actually. I think it's an Omnisphere preset. So if you're familiar, I don't know if you're familiar with Omnisphere, but it's this
I'm not.
It's this insanely expensive, it's just got every sound in the universe in it. It's like a Rompler. I think the the files for it are like 180 gig or something. And it's just got like everything in it. You can get like trance sound, you can get the sounds of a didgeridoo, you can get dude humming to himself. And I bought it years ago and then like almost never used it. But every now and then I'll like open it up and just like go to a random sound and be like, what the hell is this? Like, and sometimes it makes for a cool start for a track, right? I think the bells are very like, they remind me a lot of Blade Runner again, of like the market in Blade Runner, when he's going to go to identify the snake scale. And just that's probably where the Japanese side of things came from, right? It gave me kind of a night market vibe, and didn't end up being that as a track, but yeah.
Well, man, I'm really excited to hear.
I'm really cool.
I am. I'm really excited to hear what cool shit you come up with the modular and what comes out of all that. I'm also excited to get you hooked on the M8, to hear what you'll make with that. And I'm excited to um, encourage you to continue to release songs in 2026. Even if you miss a couple weeks, I'm
Yeah.
going to be messaging you that I want to hear what happens next week, and that who gives a shit about a streak? Like, I want to
Hmm.
hear your stuff because you make great music. You're a great part of the community, and you've been doing this way longer than me. Even if you would say it's sporadic at times, you're still a big part of the community, and want to thank you again for your help on the Discord and being on here today.
Yeah, no worries. Appreciate you saying it. It's Weekly Beats is, I think, a big part of my life, even though it is, again, music isn't a big necessarily my first hobby,
Yeah.
and it's one of those things that it's like the only online community I've ever been a part of where I felt like there were no downsides, right? Like there's no like
100%.
there's no like that one asshole. There's no like
Right?
yeah, and that's it's really cool. So I'm always recommending Weekly Beats to everyone
Yeah.
who can open up a door or plays a guitar or whatever,
Yeah.
because it really is like yeah, just one of the most welcoming, wholesome communities around.
Yeah. And I mean, it's fun to make stuff,
Yeah,
and
that's a good bonus too. Yeah,
and at the end of the year you've got a pile of stuff that you made.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
So, yeah. Well, cool. We're gonna play it on out with in Enkoji 6.
Sweet,
And thanks everyone for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
cool. Thanks for having me.
Later.
Yeah.